I'm reading from the Gospel of John, the 13th chapter, verses 31 through 35. A lesson I'm sure that most, if not all of us, know well. When he had gone out, Jesus said, "Now is the Son of Man glorified, and in him God is glorified. If God is glorified in him, God will also glorify him in himself and glorify him at once. Little children, yet in a little while I am with you. You will seek me, and as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I'm going, you cannot come. A new commandment I give you, that you love one another, even as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." And it's our lesson for this particular Sabbath morning. I think it was in Westerville, middle 80s. Church of the Master, the Sunday school superintendent had a large Sunday school session. Said the 4th, 5th grade teacher can't be present. If you can do the first 20 minutes or so that I can walk around to the different classes, then I'll take it over and you can go back and get ready for the late service. And she says, by the way, it's about the 10 Commandments, so you can just sort of ad-lib. And I thought, well, now that makes sense to me. I think I can struggle through that kind of lesson. So I was trying to talk about the 10 Commandments, and it was a class of, not rowdy children, but they obviously knew they had a different teacher and they were going to have a pretty good time. So I thought, well, I'll let them be involved. So I said, can you tell me that one of the 10 Commandments, it tells us how we should treat our mother and or our father. And one pretty little blonde, you've seen kids how they raise their hand and they're halfway across the table, or they're on the desk, and some of you have been teachers. You've been there, you've done that. And I said to the little girl, so, tell me, what one is it? What one on how we should treat our mother and or our father? And she said, to honor mom or dad. And I said, that's very good. I said, now, there's another one in terms of our household or home, or however I said it. How do we treat if you have brothers or sisters? And she came right back. She was halfway across the table again. And I said, okay, can you tell me? She says, thou shalt not kill. I'm amazed how many Christians in our churches still sometimes have missed the gospel. And I'm not trying to be judgmental, but sometimes we're very active in the church, whether it be a choir at a church or teaching or such, but we don't know the 11th commandment. And Jesus said, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, even as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all persons will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. Note first of all, and this is a shorty this morning, we've got communion. Note first of all that what Christ most desires out of all of us is that we learn to love one another. We may tithe, we may do different kinds of things in the church, but sometimes we really have to work at loving each other. And if we don't, we miss what the gospel is really all about. Some of my earlier sermons here, I talked about peanuts, and some of our guests this morning have heard me talk about peanuts at another church. Lucy stands with her arms folded, a very stern expression on her face, while Charlie Brown pleads, "Lucy, You must become more loving. This world really needs love. You have to let yourself love to make this a better place for us to live. Lucy twirls around, flips. I can't do a flip up front. She flips around and she screams at Charlie Brown, "Look, you blockhead, the world I really love. It's the people I can't stand." Some people resemble sometime that remark. Oh, they love the world, but they don't particularly want to be around people. We are to love each other, whether it be our immediate neighbors, and sometimes the Reverend's got to work at that, or the cashier. You know, Jan, when you're standing there trying to do a job at where you work, and some of the people go through and they treat you like you're not even there, or how we treat people in just almost any setting. We are judged by our actions rather than our intention at that point. We may have a heart of gold, but so does a hard-boiled egg. We must examine our text carefully. Note that Jesus says, "As I have loved you, love one another." Psych was sort of my thing in grad school, not in undergraduate school. And I often think all the different things that I had at normal psychology, all the different kinds of things together. If you could tie anything together, what could you say after being a major or minor in psych? And that is to love one another. It's not any more complicated than that. This brings me now to my second point. The source of our love, of course, is our Savior, Christ. The commandment to love is not a legalistic kind of thing, but rather it is a love that is called unconditional love. It can transform lives. We know that. How desperately we need to be able to share unconditional love to people. Well, let me just say it from my own preacher talk that I don't like. How important it is for us to have unconditional love for the neighbor down the street. Yeah, I know Emily. I got one down the street that I don't particularly care for. When I was first watching NBA basketball, and I got to admit, I don't watch it much anymore. It's probably been 30 years ago. I had a hero, and he wasn't a big-time star. His name was Tom Chambers. He played for Seattle Supersonics. Sports Illustrated had a picture of him in so many words saying, "Hey Tom, can you ever smile?" He looked like the most unhappy person playing in a basketball game. He went on to say that it was the way he protected himself, that he never could please his father, who was a good athlete himself, on how he played. There were two tragedies there. One is there was a little unconditional love going on with this young man and how the family was not sharing together. And the other was he was looking for unconditional love maybe in all the wrong places. Only Christ can be the source of that. We love because He first has loved us. We sing, "Love came down" at Christmas, and that certainly is true for most of us. You see, everything that we need to know about ethics is really found in the commandments in the Old Testament. But that's not enough. Sometimes that borders on being negative. The Old Testament includes some good commandments, but we can't forget the 11th commandment out of the New Testament of loving and caring about each other. And finally, our love for one another is our primary witness, I think, to the world, the physical world in which we live. I read a story a number of years ago of a preschool teacher who faced some burnout in her teaching career. And then her mother passed away. She took off obviously for the funeral and being around to help the family for her mother's funeral. After being off for a week, she went back to the classroom to work again with preschoolers, which in itself I know was probably not easy. The first day back, there was a little girl by the name of Rachel, as the story had been written in the Dayton Daily News. She had, gone out in the hallway and picked some flowers. And to welcome her teacher back, she gave her some flowers, and she said to her, "I'm so happy to have you back at school." But she said, "Why are you so unhappy?" Well, the teacher said, "You have to understand, my mother died, and I'm having a very difficult time." Rachel said, "Your mother died?" And Rachel looked up and said, "Did she live and then die? Did she live and then die?" And the teacher said, "Well, I don't understand, Rachel. What do you mean?" She said, "Well, I just want you to be like my mother, to live and then someday die." She says, "You know, some people die before they really live." It was really interesting if you think of an age of a 4 or 5-year-old in a preschool. One of the movies we saw years ago, Emily, I think we went with the Jones family. It was called The Color Purple. If you're ever looking to go to the library and rent it, if you haven't seen the movie, it's really a good movie. It's about Sophie, how she experienced some kindness in a dark and a troubling time of her life. It's an inspirational kind of movie, and I know the preacher's not supposed to stand at the pulpit and be recommending a movie for you, but it's really a good one about love and forgiveness. The Color Purple. The primary requirement that Christ asked out of all of us is that we love. That we love because He first loved us. How can you tell someone lives close to Christ? Oh, there are many ways that many people can tell you, maybe out of a Bible study. But love, I think, is our primary witness and a primary foundation for our foundation. It is the 11th Commandment. All right, we're going to share together in communion, and I will